Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. We are here to talk about clearing your clutter for Christmas. Make room for Jesus. So I will you can post questions that I will address at the end. But mostly, I want you to take a deep breath and just relax. I don't want you to worry about taking notes because you're going to get a handout at the end that will tell you everything you need to know in order to implement what we're talking about. And I really do hope that you will implement it because you can watch this or listen to this for 30 minutes, but then if nothing changes as a result, if you don't do anything differently, then you might as well have been taking a nap or scrolling through social media. So take a deep breath, relax so that the Spirit of God can speak to you about what He wants you to hear in this presentation. And then at the end, I will give you a handout. We'll send you a handout that will give you everything you need to know. So I have a question for you. Do you have more clutter in your home or office than you prefer? Secondly, do you know someone whose life is diminished because of their clutter? Recently, I did a webinar and I got a response from a woman in Greece, I believe it was. And she said, I have so much clutter because I love too many people and too many things. And I replied to her by saying, well, God tells us you can't love too many people. He tells us to love everyone, but too many things, that's a big problem. And she replied, I just can't let go of the memories of my husband and family. And it has destroyed my relationship with my daughter. Clutter can destroy. It can destroy your relationship with others. It can destroy your relationship with yourself because you lose self-respect about your ability to control your environment. So today, I want you to have a very specific methodology that you can use to overcome the clutter in your life. Clutter comes in many forms. It comes in physical, digital, emotional, and spiritual. Today, we're going to talk primarily about physical because my experience is that the physical clutter that we have is actually a representation of a lot of the emotional and spiritual things that are going on in our lives. First, I want to dispel 3 myths. Number 1, handle a piece of paper only once. Lie. Does not work. So let me explain why. Let's say you put a pile of papers in the middle of your desk or on the kitchen counter and you say, okay, today's the day I'm going to go through this. I'm going to clean this mess up. And you pick up the first piece of paper and think of any number of reasons why today's not a good day to deal with this piece of paper. And you pick up the second and the third. And before you know it, the pile that was on this side of the desk is on this side. So the difference is you handle it only once to decide how to implement your decision. My business for over 40 years has been based on 4 words. Clutter is postponed decisions. But it isn't enough to decide. You have to have a way to implement that decision. Secondly, a place for everything and everything in its place. If you think that that's what organized means, if you think being clutter-free means you're never going to have a mess, well, that's a lie as well. It's half right. A place for everything is important, but everything in its place is a myth. Clutter happens. Life is messy. It just is. And unless you're one of the very rare people, there are some people who really do have a place for everything and everything that's placed. But that leads me to the third myth. Barbara Hemphill is not naturally organized. The people who've been around me for long know that I like to start things. I don't like to finish them. I like the big picture. I don't like the details. And I can make a mess with the best of them. Just recently, I was making a favorite family recipe, which is called a fruit pizza. And I actually did a video of what the kitchen looked like when I was done because it was a complete disaster. And my desk is often the same way. But here's the little thing that is different if you're organized. You identify what level of clutter you're willing to live with. In my life, it's a week's worth. So if you come into my office or my home for that matter, on a Thursday, you might look around and say, and they pay you money for helping people get organized. But on Friday, it's like, okay, that's it. Now everything has a place. Now it has to go back and it has to take less than 30 minutes in order for it to get there. I told that story to a client one time, and he said, that makes me think of something. He said, I hate clearing up clutter. But he said, if I would do it first thing in the morning, I could do it in a minute or two. And then it would be like Brian Tracy's book, Eat That Frog. It was like everything else would be easy for the rest of the day. So the level of clutter he was willing to live with was one day and less than 5 minutes to clean it up. Mine is 1 week and less than 30 minutes to clean it up. So a place for everything, yes, everything in its place, only once in a while. But if you can never, or you don't know where, clutter's not the problem. It's when you don't know what to do with the problem. So today, what I want to give you are these 7 steps. They're very finite steps. And my reason for giving them to you is I want you to have success in organizing, in eliminating the clutter in one area of your life. And when you've had that success in one area, then you'll see how it works and you'll be willing to try it again. So I have a story about that. My book, Less Clutter, More Life, the photographs in it, which are really beautiful, were done by a friend of mine, Louise Wanier. And she admitted when we started working on the book together, that clutter was really hard for her to deal with. And so I insisted, I said, if you're going to help me write this book, you must experience this process that we use to organize our clutter. So pick a particular area that you would like to organize. She picked her jewelry drawer. And we organized her jewelry drawer. That was back in 2014. And just recently, I heard her on a call with someone talking about how she loved her organized jewelry drawer. So, step one is before you do anything, step one is identify one or more destinations for donations. Why is this so important and why did I put it at number one? Because one of the major reasons that people have clutter is they want to be responsible. This was expensive. This was given to me by somebody I love. Somebody would love this. Well, one of the best ways to be responsible is to find one of the many places that will take donations. So I recommend that you have one or preferably two. So if there's a day you want to donate and they're not open, you've got a second day. Now, I want to give you one bit of caution here. One of the big stumbling blocks to getting rid of clutter is perfectionism. And just this Sunday, I saw AARP put out a whole publication on how to get rid of different things. And it listed where you could donate all these different things. And I looked at it and the red flags just went up because many people would look at that and say, oh, I have all those things. And then donating all those things to 5 or 10 or 15 different organizations would become a full-time job because they're trying to do it perfectly. So instead, find an agency, an organization that you trust, that you would like to support, and let them figure out what to do with it. And they will do it in a responsible way. Number 2, focus on your clutter. I cannot tell you how many books I have not sold because I would be at the back of the room with my books and somebody would come up and say, I'm buying this for my wife or my husband or my mother or my child. And I wouldn't sell it to them because getting rid of clutter is something we have to be willing to do for ourselves. It's change, and change has to come from within. We want to. When I married my husband, we've been married 36 years now, and he's a retired colonel in the Army. And I just assumed that somebody like that would be organized. Well, I was in for a rude shock because I realized that clutter didn't bother him. And at first I thought, this is going to be the end of my career. But then I realized he didn't really he wasn't my client. He didn't want to get organized. But sometimes his clutter frustrates me. It still does. But you know what I've learned that solves the problem, and I've done it hundreds of times. Every time I feel frustrated with his clutter, I go find some clutter of my own. Everybody has clutter somewhere because things keep coming in. It's not like clutter clearing is something you do. It's like, oh, good, that's done for the rest of my life. So I go find some clutter of my own that's bothering me. And when I clean up my own clutter, I feel better about I don't his doesn't bother me nearly so much. Number 3, start small. And the reason I say small is because I want you to have this project that you're is one, let's just say it's the top shelf in the master bedroom. And then the next step that brings you to step 4 is to make an appointment with yourself to do it and honor it. Have you ever noticed how good you are at honoring other people's appointments or appointments you have with other people? So step 4 is honor your appointment with yourself, or maybe appointments, which would be even better. If you have lots of clutter, you're not going to do it in one time. So maybe you would pick a specific time, a day of the week or a time of the day, but don't think that it has to be a big project. If you make it a big project, you won't accomplish anything. So let's say you're going to pick that top shelf in the garage. Number 5 is choose an accountability partner. Research shows that we are 76% more likely to accomplish a goal if you have an accountability partner. I remember many years ago, I was just starting as an organizing consultant, and I was in the garage with an astrophysicist in Washington, D.C., and we were cleaning out boxes of paper in his garage. And at one point, he was laughing. And he said, if anybody would have ever told me I'd be laughing cleaning out my garage, I would have told them they were crazy. But I was his accountability partner. And my mother used to say, growing up on the farm in Nebraska, many hands make light work. And it's true. So maybe your accountability partner is just someone that you're going to say, I'm doing this on this day. Please remind me, or please make sure if I did it. Or what you may want to do is find somebody else who wants to clear their clutter, and then you do it at the same time, or you trade off and you go do yours one day and somebody else's the next day, but a way so that it doesn't have to be such a heavy project, and you might even get some laughter out of it. That brings me to step number 6, which is the most important step, and it's the one, if you leave it out, will most likely cause you to fail. And that is, you allow 10 minutes for cleanup for every hour of decluttering. Let's say you're doing that top shelf in the garage, or let's say you're in the master bedroom. And in it, you find something that goes into the laundry room. So you take it and you walk into the laundry room, and oh, there's stuff in there too. And so then you're in there for a little bit. And then you find something that belongs in the garage. And then you go in there, and then you're there for a little bit. And the next thing you know, your time is gone and you have more messes than when you started. There's a very simple way to stop that problem. And that is, if you say you're going to organize for an hour, you set a timer for 50 minutes. And when you're in that top shelf of the closet and you find something that goes into the laundry room, don't go there. Just put it in a pile right outside the garage or right outside the closet. You may want to have some post-it notes to put labels on it so you don't forget what it's for. You would have a box for donations, a trash bag for things you're going to throw away, and then places that things need to go. One of the things we say about decluttering is that in every process, it feels worse before it gets better. And that's what's going to happen then. And a lot of times then people stop, but know that that's normal. Then when the timer goes off at 50 minutes, now you have 10 minutes to take those things that went other places and take them there. So let's review those 6 steps once again. Number 1, identify one or more destinations for your donations. That's step number 1. It's going to be on your handout, so you don't have to write it down, but I just want to get this in your head. Number 2, focus on your clutter, not your child's, and not your husband's, not your roommate's. And you know what I'd also suggest is don't talk about what you're doing. Just do it. It'll have a bigger impact that way. Number 3, start small. Set a specific goal with a specific deadline. Number 4, honor your appointment with yourself. Number 5, choose an accountability partner. And number 6, allow 10 minutes for cleanup for every hour you organize. And number 7, one word, very simple, repeat. Repeat the process. And if you take this, it'll be like Louise's jewelry drawer. We did the jewelry drawer, and then it inspired her every time she saw it to go and do something else because she knew that in a short period of time, she could get great results. So, what are the stumbling blocks to getting rid of clutter? Because if it were easy, I wouldn't be doing this class and I wouldn't still be in business after 40 years. My experience is that the biggest obstacle to clearing clutter is emotion. Many years ago, I was signing my book, Taming the Paper Tiger, in Barnes & Noble in New York City. And I made the comment that in my experience, every time I met someone who had difficulty letting go of things, if I ask enough questions, I would always find that they had experienced a severe emotional loss in their life. When my presentation was over, a young man walked up to me and he said, "My apartment is so full of stuff, mostly paper." And he said, "I come home." He said, "I haven't had any friends or family in it for years because I'm too ashamed." And he said, "I come home from work at night and I say, okay, tonight's the night. I'm going to clean this up." And he said, "I pick up the papers and I literally become physically paralyzed." And he said, "I sort on the bed because that's the biggest flat surface." And he said, "Literally, some nights I shove the papers away and crawl into bed with my papers." And he looked at me with teary eyes and he said, "My mother died when I was 6. Are you telling me that I have to deal with the grief of losing my mother before I can handle my paper?" Well, I answered that I couldn't really answer that because I'm not a mental health professional. I said, "But I can tell you what I've learned from experience. And that is, if you find someone you trust, most likely it won't be a family member. And that person can help you decide." Remember, we said clutter is postponed decisions. So you have to decide, not someone else. And that's one of the reasons that in a family, when someone says you don't need that, that person kind of hangs on even more because it has to be their decision. So if you find someone you trust that will help you decide what you need and want to keep, you will solve your paper problem. I've seen it hundreds of times. And it may also help with some of the other emotions. I was speaking at a university to a large group of women, and a woman came up and said, "You just saved my marriage." I said, wow, that's a pretty dramatic statement. Could you elaborate? She said, I came to this conference with the intention of telling my husband, to whom I'd been married for 13 years, that I was leaving because he's a pack rat and I have allergies and I can't keep the house clean and it makes me sick. And he said, but, and she stopped and she said, I never realized until I heard you that it wasn't that he wouldn't get rid of it, but that he couldn't. His mother died when he was 7 years old. So I asked her, may I ask you, make a suggestion? She said, of course. And I said, go home and say to your husband something to the effect of, I never understood before how important all these things are to you. Let's figure out how we can keep them and still live together. I followed up with them for several months, and it was amazing the change that happened. Now, it took 13 years to collect it, so it didn't happen overnight, but it kept getting better and better. And that, my friends, is the really important part. Is it getting better every day? Because every day that it gets better, you get more skilled. My first mother-in-law was a polio survivor, and she had a saying that I just loved. I admired her so much. And one of the things she would say was, every day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. And that's the way you can be with clutter. And the better you get, the more skilled you will be at it. For one of the things her husband began to say was, oh, this collection, we can take a photograph of it, and then I'm willing to get rid of it. So there are ways that people can overcome it if they are given permission and understand the grief. Another big obstacle is the one I mentioned earlier, is that perfectionism. I remember one of my very first clients was a hoarder. I didn't do hoarders very long. I did a few and realized that that was not for me, but she was. She was an amazing woman. She was so intelligent. She raced cars, she did knitting and quilts, she built computers, and she also only had one hand. The other hand was a hook because she'd lost her arm in an accident. And she called me to help her organize. It took us months and months because her mother had died and left her 100 dresser drawers full of clutter as well. We got everything organized for her. And 3 years later, she called and she wanted me to come back. And she sounded kind of embarrassed. And I was thinking, oh, I don't even know if I want to go back. And I walked in, and the entire house was fine, except for one office, which had lots of paper in it, had gotten out of control. But she had forgotten, and that started me at that point, making sure that I took a photograph of before and after. And the reason I did that was because my clients would forget how much progress they had made. And you might find that too. So one technique that you may find helpful, it's in a book, Love It or Lose It, Living Clutter-Free Forever, which I wrote several years ago, which is going to come out again in January. And that was one of the techniques we suggested, was take a picture of the before and then take a picture of the after, and you can see how much better you've got, so that every day in every way, you're getting better and better. We have never been taught how to get organized. I remember I was working in a company one day, helping a woman organize her office. And she looked at me at one point. We got her papers organized, put it into what we call our finding system. And she looked at me and she said, I have been employed for 32 years. This is the first time that anyone ever showed me how to organize my office. I happened to be blessed by parents. I grew up on a farm. My mother was the executive assistant to the president of a bank for 40 years. So she showed me, she demonstrated we lived a systemized, organized life. It wasn't always clutter-free because it was a small space. We lived in the second floor of a tenant farmhouse. And when I was very young, there was not even running water there. But we always had ways to organize things. And so I lived that. But I learned that not everybody was lucky to have that. And that's why I hope that you will reach out and not feel ashamed or embarrassed that you don't know how. Let's just figure out how to do it because I know that it can be done. And when you overcome the clutter, you will feel so much better in so many ways. Instead of feeling incompetent, you'll feel skilled. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you can actually feel joyous about what you have accomplished. And your clutter will no longer be keeping you from the things that really matter in your life. So after this webinar, you will get an email that has this handout with those things. And it will also list other resources that will be available for you. One is there is a webinar. It's a free webinar called TameYourPaperTiger.com. And it runs different times. It's 2 hours long. And we found that 90% of the people stay on it for 2 hours because they're actually working on their clutter and they're getting results. So that will be one thing. The second thing is I'm offering a special opportunity now. I have a project, a generosity project in India where I'm building the Shepherd's House ministry. And I need to raise money to build the building. We've got one floor done, but we need to get 2 more floors before we're finished. It's going to be a ministry center and an entrepreneurial center. So I've decided to offer my 90-minute vision accelerator session. It's 90 minutes of the two of us looking at your life. What is your vision? You know, God says, without a vision, the people perish. And if you have a vision that you haven't accomplished, let's talk about what it is. Or maybe you will be like one of my clients who said, I'm implementing a vision I didn't even know I had. So you can go to barbarahemphill.com, to my website, and you can sign up for that Vision Accelerator session. And then you can just make a donation of your choice, which will be tax deductible, to the Shepherd's House ministry. My license plate says Hope Fool. And when people ask me why, I say, because I'm a fool for Jesus. And HOPE stands for Help Others Pursue Entrepreneurship, which has been my passion for 40 years. When I saw the photographs from Florida after the hurricane came, and I saw people standing on top of their cars, and I realized because they were trying to keep from drowning, they undoubtedly didn't have their phones, they didn't have their wallets, but if they had Jesus, they had everything. So the most important decision you'll ever make is, who is Jesus? I love him, and I would love for you to meet him if you haven't. Merry Christmas.